whatever we think of. If we think of J. Edgar Hoover will appear and destroy us, okay? So empty your heads.
I couldn't help it. It just popped in there.
What?
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Well, there's something you don't see every day.
Tried to think of the most harmless thing. Something I loved from my childhood.
Sorry, Venkman. I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought.
2, 3, go!
Directed and produced by the dearly missed Ivan Reitman and written by Dan Aykroyd and the late Harold Ramis, Ghostbusters was a box office success and cultural phenomenon. Starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis, and co-starring Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, and Ernie Hudson, Ghostbusters was released on June 8, 1984, and grossed $282 million during its initial theatrical run, earning it the spot of the second highest-grossing film of 1984, placing it between Beverly Hills Cop and The Temple of Doom, and earning it the title of the then highest-grossing comedy ever. Even its theme song, Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr., became a #1 hit. It's hard to look back and imagine a world where Ghostbusters wasn't a massive success, but in all honesty, this was an incredibly ambitious project, and I'm confident that in many other timelines, Ghostbusters flopped. Throughout the production of this project, there would be a multitude of forks in the road that could either lead the filmmakers to feast or famine, and despite all odds, Ghostbusters would come ahead as one of the greatest dual-genre narrative successes of all time. Hey guys, what's happening? Preston here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're going to be covering the monumentally successful collaborative process that gave us Ghostbusters.
You're always so concerned about your reputation. Einstein did his best stuff when he was working as a patent clerk.
You know how much a patent clerk earns? No!
The film's journey to the big screen started with its writer, Dan Aykroyd. Aykroyd had a childhood fascination with ghosts, passed down to him by his parents. His mother was a believer in the paranormal, claiming to have laid eyes on a specter, and his father actually published a book on the subject, A History of Ghosts.
They've asked me, do I believe in ghosts and are ghosts real? And I can't lie to them, and I have to tell them that I do believe, and I do believe they're real.
His passion for the supernatural and his love for classic paranormal films such as The Ghostbreakers and Ghost Chasers compelled him to modernize the genre for a new audience.
10 people witnessed a free-floating, full-torso vaporous apparition. It blew books off shelves from 20 feet away and scared the socks off some poor librarian.
Originally, the film looked much different than it would by the time it made it to audiences. Aykroyd intended for the film to star himself, his close friend John Belushi, and Eddie Murphy. The earliest draft saw the Ghostbusters traveling throughout space and time, thwarting the supernatural in spectacular fashion. Unfortunately, after the untimely death of John Belushi, the production would see major changes. A number of talented actors were considered for the role of Peter Venkman, including Michael Keaton, Chevy Chase, Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Steve Guttenberg, and Richard Pryor. Aykroyd ultimately decided to cast Bill Murray in the lead role, who agreed informally, which is apparently just how Murray did things in those days. This left only the decision of who to approach to direct the project. To Aykroyd, it made sense to bring legendary director Ivan Reitman onto the project, as he'd had success directing both of the prospective leads, Belushi in Animal House and Murray in Stripes. Reitman would then bring on the talented Michael C. Gross and Joe Medjuk as associate producers. Gross's work in hiring and supervising a team of conceptual designers as they curated the look and feel of the ghosts was crucial to the film's success. They needed to feel scary, but not outright horrifying. Off the bat, Gross's intimate understanding of the tone of the film set a framework for the progress that would ripple throughout the project. Medjuk's impact is mostly felt through his fantastic work in organizing casting for the remaining talent of the film, including Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, and Ernie Hudson as the fourth Ghostbuster, Winston Zeddemore. Medjuk and Gross both played roles that far exceed what I've mentioned here, but their feats are so numerous that for the sake of time, I simply can't list each and every one. The original treatment of Ghostbusters that Aykroyd pitched to Reitman was reportedly much darker in tone and was intended to be much scarier than the Ghostbusters we know today. Additionally, the idea of interdimensional ghostbusting would prove so expensive that Reitman had reservations that the film could even be made, speculating that it would cost upwards of $200 million to bring the original draft to life. Despite this, he was thrilled to workshop the concept into something more shootable. To implement these changes, Reitman brought on the talented Harold Ramis, who was initially only contracted as a writer but would later decide to play Egon after feeling compelled to rise to the occasion. Ramis felt that he was the best Egon for the script, though he never intended to star in the film. Reitman tasked Ramis to help Aykroyd implement the tonal and budgetary changes that he envisioned for the script. After securing their funding of $25 to $30 million and their deadline from Columbia Pictures, Ramis, Aykroyd, and Reitman immediately began to workshop the script.
What do you think, Egon?
I think this building should be condemned.
Wow! This place is great. When can we move in?
Ramis and Aykroyd would often work independently and exchange and revise each other's drafts. Aykroyd reportedly worked on developing comical situations and refining the infamous Ghostbusters sci-fi jargon.
Sir, what you had there was what we refer to as a focused, non-terminal repeating phantasm, or a Class 5 full roaming vapor.
While Ramis refined the jokes and the dialogue.
The power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion. Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Aykroyd took inspiration from classic fiction archetypes when writing the characters of Venkman, Ray, and Egon, particularly those seen in The Wizard of Oz, equating the characters respectively to the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man. Egon would be the brains, Venkman the mouth, and Ray the heart. Aykroyd, while undeniably talented, considered himself to be a kitchen sink writer, a term that essentially boils down to a writer who has difficulty managing the scope of a project. You know, he throws in everything but the kitchen sink. The symptoms of this likely manifested as a $200 million initial treatment. However, what makes Aykroyd different than most kitchen sink writers is that he acknowledged this vulnerability and confronted it, allowing Reitman to bring Ramis on to liberally rework the script without a meltdown. The two adapted Aykroyd's original vision in order to craft a story that most faithfully served the characters and the comedy, while also preserving some elements of suspense and horror. As an extension of this openness to change so early on in the creative process, Reitman reciprocated by approaching the ideas presented to him by both cast and crew openly, often switching them on the fly in order to better serve the narrative. Reitman's ability to hire talented individuals like Ramis, Gross, and Medjug, and then delegate and trust them, led to a series of critical successes that made Ghostbusters into the heartfelt classic we know today.
This is Winston Zedmore. He's here about the job.
Beautiful, you're hired. Ray Stantz, Pete Venkman.
Congratulations.
Can you help me, please?
From a production standpoint, Ghostbusters is a masterclass on what's achievable in cinema when you bring on talented people and don't second-guess your decision, but more on that later. From a narrative perspective, Ghostbusters works so well as a result of its ability to integrate two typically paradoxical elements of storytelling. Ghostbusters has comedy-centric character development that embeds itself seamlessly within layers of grounded and often terrifying world-building. Each of these factors contributed to and fueled one another in a perpetual motion that really made Ghostbusters feel fresh and unique.
It wasn't difficult striking a balance between the scary stuff and the comedy because so much comedy comes out of tension and fear anyway.
While the film presents a cast of characters each lovable and interesting in their own right, the pulse of the film is the relationship between two characters in particular, Peter Venkman and Dana Barrett. When we meet Peter Venkman, he's a sleazy and washed-up professor at Columbia University who's working off grant money to investigate the paranormal. However, Venkman utilizes the facilities to woo impressionable co-eds, so it comes as no surprise when the soon-to-be Ghostbusters are fired from their position. Venkman then convinces his lifelong friend Ray to mortgage the home that his parents left him in order to start the Ghostbusters franchise, at a laughably terrible rate.
But at 19%, you didn't even bargain with the guy.
Ray, for your information, the interest rate alone for the first 5 years comes to $95,000.
Fortunately for Ray, Venkman, and Egon, their otherwise clinically insane business model becomes profitable due to the paranormal unrest that just so happens to be brewing in the city.
Go! Okay, go! You got him. Don't cross the stream.
Maybe now you'll never slime a guy with a positron collider, huh?
Soon they have more work than they can handle and reach celebrity status, appearing on the cover of multiple magazines and making appearances on talk show programming. Meanwhile, Dana, a professional cellist, finds herself in the midst of a paranormal situation in her penthouse apartment. She contracts the Ghostbusters to eradicate the problem much like any exterminator would. However, when Venkman arrives to address the issue, he's enamored by the beautiful and sharp-tongued Dana, and soon reverts to his old ways of scientific quackery as a means to impress women. This silliness exemplifies a blatant lack of professionalism that pushes Dana to question the danger that she'd previously experienced. I mean, the logic follows. If the Ghostbusters can't be taken seriously, then why should the ghosts?
That's the bedroom, but nothing ever happened in there.
What a crime.
You know, you don't act like a scientist. You're more like a game show host.
This essentially leads to a situation in which Venkman's charming but inconsiderate antics put Dana into serious danger. Dana unknowingly sits in the midst of an ancient ritual designed to bring about the end of the world. Her apartment is essentially a massive antenna designed to gather and focus supernatural energy for a sinister purpose. She's later possessed by an ancient Sumerian demigod named Zul, and her union with Zul's counterpart Vince Clortho opens the gate to allow Gozer the Destructor to enter their world and exterminate humanity.
She says she's the gatekeeper.
I just met the Keymaster. He's here with me now.
We have to get these two together.
I think that would be extraordinarily dangerous.
On the surface, we're presented with a dark, apocalyptic tale that provides the perfect backdrop for our modern-day knights to slay the proverbial dragon and save the realm. This is a historically proven formula for an entertaining plot, but of course, a natural-born hero saving the world is boring on its own. What makes Ghostbusters stand out from every story with this exact same premise is that at its core, it isn't a tale about saving the world. It's a tale about an aloof, silver-tongued scientist whose borderline unethical romantic tendencies result in failure. Failure that endangers someone that he now realizes is much more important to him than he initially thought. These failures force him to grow, change, and take responsibility in order to right his wrongs and save the girl. But Sigourney Weaver, unlike her on-screen counterpart Dana Barrett, is no damsel in distress. Weaver is a certified bad bitch, and her impact on the Ghostbusters film is arguably more pivotal in the narrative success of the project than any of her other castmates. And believe me when I tell you, that is a very, very tall order.
And you were in Aliens before Ghostbusters, and that was really dramatic. And I'm wondering, how did you get on Ghostbusters when it was a comedy?
I had to audition a lot. I know the director was very dubious about whether I could do this. I think they were all a little dubious. They're probably still dubious.
Initially, the lead filmmakers were resistant to cast Sigourney Weaver in the role of Dana. Daryl Hannah, Denise Crosby, and Julia Roberts all auditioned for the role of Dana Barrett as well. And Raymond was particularly impressed with Julia Roberts' Dana. Though Weaver had made an appearance on Woody Allen's comedy Annie Hall, she was coming off projects such as Alien, The Year of Living Dangerously, and Mad Men. While no one doubted her abilities as an actress or her success in the horror genre, they were concerned because all of her recent roles had been so serious. They needed to know if she had what it took to shine in a unique comedy setting like Ghostbusters.
There is no Dana, only soul.
What a lovely singing voice you must have.
For her audition, she got on all fours on top of Reitman's coffee table and barked like a dog. I'm serious, she barked like a dog.
I jumped around and I turned into a dog and I barked and howled and I ate the cushions and I looked up and he was sitting there going like this and I got the job. But I didn't have to prove myself.
What makes this so intriguing is that the script she was presented with predated Dana being possessed by Zool. It was her idea. Reitman later recalled the encounter describing, her idea of being possessed really personalized the larger concept. She was barely out of my office when we were writing it already.
So people say that every movie is really three movies. It's the movie you set out to make, it's the movie you think you've made, and the movie you find out that you did make when it's over. The script is like the best you can do before you actually get there and find out how it's really going to feel when you're doing it.
Sigourney had found the missing link to the story and dropped it into the laps of the showrunners while simultaneously proving that she completely understood the humor of the project. Her coffee table antics proved her intrinsic mastery of storytelling by connecting the plot's goal of saving the world with the story's more important goal of converting Venkman from lovable degen to endearing but flawed hero. With that, the film now had a satisfying conclusion for the emotional tension of the story, which also provided a gratifying resolution to the plot as well. As I mentioned earlier, I believe this to be the most crucial bit of crew-based improvisation that made Ghostbusters more than just a typical horror comedy, but a genuinely heartfelt story. However, it isn't the only one, and not by a long shot.
So we start every shooting day by taking the script we've got, we read through it, and we go, this will not work. And then we start using our improvisational skills, and not ad-libbing while the camera's rolling, but preparing what we're going to say in the upcoming scene.
Despite the efforts on the parts of Aykroyd, Ramis, and Reitman to polish and deliver very strong dialogue for the script, when it came down to it, they all allowed their writer, actor, comedian cast to play with it, to have fun and let their characters speak organically, and why wouldn't they? Aykroyd and Murray, as well as the late Belushi, who they intended to star in the film, all had experience working on Saturday Night Live, a program that owes its success entirely to its collaborative and spontaneous writing process.
Do you find that some of the best scenes are improv?
Yeah, not ad-lib, not although Bill will take some liberties while the camera's rolling.
By all accounts, almost none of the dialogue that made it into the theatrical release was in the original script. Murray's side-splitting performance was largely his own, and it's hilarious.
Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes, the dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's funny, it's unique, but it also serves the dual purpose of both characterizing and complexifying the character of Venkman.
I make it a rule never to get involved with possessed people.
I want you inside me.
Go ahead. No, I can't.
My favorite example of this character-driven improv dialogue is our introduction to Louis Tully.
I was just exercising. I taped a 20-minute workout on my machine and played it back at high speed, so it only took 10 minutes. I got a great workout.
Good.
You want to come in for a mineral waters? My 4th anniversary as an accountant, you know, and even though you do your own tax return, which you shouldn't do, I'd like you to stop by, being that you're my neighbor and all.
Well, thank you, Luce. I'll really try to stop by.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, which is weird because it seems sort of like a throwaway character introduction, but really it's got a ton of heart to it. It's easy to use improv to make people laugh, but it's much more difficult to use improv to make people care. Moranis' portrayal of Tully makes the audience actually fear for him as he's terrorized by Vince Clortho. Of course, this is just a really solid bit all around, but deep down, I think we were all genuinely concerned with his safety.
Nice doggy. You little pooch. Baby, I got a milk bone.
The way that the film balances the narrative spheres, the union of Zuul and Vince Clortho, with the audience's spheres, the safety of Louis and Dana, in such a comedically sound fashion is critical in the film's success as a dual-genre experiment. We've spent the entire film on the edge of our seats watching the dawn of the Sumerian apocalypse unfold, but in the final act, we don't give a shit about the millions of souls about to be lost at the hands of Mr. Stay Puft. We're dying to know if the Ghostbusters have what it takes to save Louis and Dana, not the world.
It smells like barbecued dog hair. Oh, Venkman, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just forgot.
And I think that's what makes Ghostbusters so successful. At the end of the day, both the ghost and the bustings end up playing second fiddle to a silly but endearing character drama. The filmmakers' crusade to make a film with genuine laughs, scares, and heart went off without a hitch.
Well, that wasn't such a chore now, was it?
Okay, one hitch.
Okay, who brought the dog?
Open a can of imagination with Play-Doh.
The chilling score, the beautiful matte paintings and special effects, and perfectly crafted dark atmosphere made the threat of Gozar feel genuinely horrifying, just as Aykroyd had likely intended in the original treatment that Reitman had reservations about. But I think that the concerns he had were valid. I mean, how is it supposed to be funny if it's genuinely scary? How is it supposed to be touching if the whole thing is an SNL bit? How is the audience supposed to feel the danger of Gozar and the comedic genius of the ensemble cast, all while staying invested in the narrative? How did the filmmakers possibly navigate this treacherous balancing act and still come out on top?
Why Ghostbusters was special, I think, in my life was that it was a culminating moment of work with a group of people that I'd worked with before, and we had learned to work together in a really unique and special way.
At the risk of coming off corny and sentimental, I think that the key was that they just listened to one another. They trusted one another. They were open to one another in a way that is rarely seen in collaborations of this scale with names this big. Think about it. Aykroyd could have pitched a fit when the director he hired immediately hired a different writer to fix the script, but he didn't. Reitman could have pitched a fit when the final script still had quite a lot of that original darkness and special effects dependency that he was so concerned about in the treatment, but instead, he just trusted Aykroyd. Hell, even Ramis could have pitched a fit when the bulk of his dialogue was thrown out the window in favor of improvisation. But just like when Ramis stepped up to the plate to play Egon, the filmmakers always based their decision off what served the film and not their egos. Ghostbusters was successful because of the understanding that the filmmakers had, not only with their craft, but with one another. They listened to one another, approached their strengths and weaknesses honestly, and above all, they put the film's needs in front of their own, without exception.
Working with Ivan as a director and having confidence in him allowed me to focus on my work as an actor, but also on my work as a writer. It seemed so funny on the page, and we just knew how the casting would work out. We trusted each other so implicitly.
There was a great comfort in working with these guys because there was a shorthand involved, but more than that, there was the comfort that you didn't have to watch your back.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.